it's Anthony, and I'm back for another lesson. Today we're going to talk about finger picking. This is something that a lot of acoustic guitarists desire to do, and for good reason. It sounds pretty, it's something that you can definitely add to your playing as a contrast to strumming. So let's just dive right in and go over what fingers are responsible for what strings. So basically when finger picking, of course there's exceptions to this rule, but your thumb is going to be responsible for the E, A, and D strings. And then the last three strings is one finger per string. So you have pointer finger on the G, middle finger on the B, ring finger on the high E. Okay, again, that's thumb for the top three, E, A, and D. Then you have pointer is responsible for G, middle is responsible for B, and ring responsible for high E. Your pinky, as you may have already noticed, is going to be used as an anchor. All right, so you're going to kind of anchor that down so that your other fingers are freed up to do the finger picking. Okay, so we're going to use an E major chord for this first pattern. All right, this first pattern is called Travis picking. It's a famous way of finger picking, and it's a 4-note pattern that obviously repeats. It's going to be low E, obviously with your thumb, B with your middle as always, D with your thumb as always, and G with your pointer as always. So from now on I'll just refer to what strings that we are picking instead of what fingers, because again, thumb responsible for the top three, then it's pointer, middle, ring. Okay? So we have, again, the Travis picking pattern is E, low E, B, D, G, E, B, D, G, E, B, D, G, E, B, D, G. Just like we talked about in the strumming lesson, you're going to want to take that slow. You're going to want to use a metronome, make sure it's nice and steady, and then eventually at your own pace work it up to speed. You want to be able to do the Travis picking as fast as the song calls for. So let's move on to an A chord with the same pattern. So what you may have noticed, may or may not have, is the first note was the low E, which happens to be the root of that chord. So if it's an E major chord, obviously E is our root. So since E is the root, that's the first thing that we're going to pick. So now A is the root. So actually that open A, it works out perfectly. That open A is the root of our next chord, the A chord. So let's try the same pattern. The only thing we're going to change out of the whole 4 notes is the first note is going to be A instead of low E. Let's try. So it's A, B, D, G, A, B, D, G. And I'm referring to the string names, not necessarily the actual notes that they are playing. Okay. Let's go back and forth once or twice. What I've noticed, and in any patterns that I do, I'll pretty much never have my thumb playing a low E and an A within the same phrase or the same pattern. A lot of times it'll be either low E or A and the D. So it'll be E and D or A and D. E and D or A and D. The thumb a lot of times is going to be doing a lot of work because again it's responsible for 3 out of 6 strings. And the other fingers are just responsible for 1. So a lot of times you'll notice that you'll very rarely, if ever, use the low E and the A in the same pattern. Now obviously if you switch chords, you're going to want that first note that you play with your thumb to be the root of that chord. So even if it's a slash chord, you're going to want to do the note that's after the slash. So for instance, a D over F sharp, you're going to want to hit that E string you want your bass note to be played, the lowest note that you're playing to be the root of the chord or the slash note of a slash chord, okay? So for C, it would be the A string right here. Okay? So, again, let's try one more time. On the E, on the A. One last time. All right, let's try another one. So that's in 4/4, and so is this next one, and eventually we'll get to 2/6/8 patterns as well. So I'm going to move a little bit quicker now that you understand the basics of finger picking and what strings your fingers are responsible for, and so on and so forth, and even playing the roots as the first note of the pattern. So let's use E and A again, and here's another pattern. This one's an 8-note pattern. It goes like this. Okay, so it is E, G, D, B, D, G, D, G. So you could think of it in 2 groups of 4. E, G, D, B is the first group of 4, and then it's just D, G, D, G is the second group of 4. So all together. Same thing would hold true. You would play, if you're going to play an A chord, you would play the A as the first note instead of the low E. Okay. Next one is in 6/8. It's pretty easy. It's very similar to the 6/8 strum variation that I went over in the strumming lesson. And so just to switch it up, let's just use a G chord this time. So we're going to do G chord. You're going to do low E, a little bit of a pause, a 1/8 note pause, and then you're going to go D, G, D, G. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Let's say we go to C. We're going to use the A string as our first note. The cool thing about this one, I really like it because it opens up your other 2 fingers to kind of play the chord if you want, or even mess around and just alternate and not do the exact strict pattern because it's so simple. You can do stuff like this. Once you get comfortable, just like I said with strumming, you can come up with your own strumming patterns. Here you can use these as just a basis or a foundation for kind of making up your own thing. So instead of just doing E, D, G, D, G, you can go E, D, G, D, B, or whatever you like. All right, and then the last one that we're going to go over is similar to the second one that we did, just in 6/8. So let's go back to E. It's going to be E, G, D, B, just like the other one. And then instead of D, G, D, G, it's just going to be one set of D, G. So it's E, G, D, B, then D, G. So all together. And it'll make sense if it's a little bit faster. All right, hope that gives you a good foundation of finger picking patterns. And as always, like I said with the strumming patterns, feel free to make up your own. Have fun.